To everyone gathered here today in a continuing united effort to discuss and share best practices in climate change and transition finance within the ambit of our collective vision of sustainable and inclusive development banking, a pleasant good morning. As a proponent of sustainable and inclusive growth, the Development Bank of the Philippines has always championed environmental protection and preservation. Starting with the World Bank-funded Industrial Restructuring Project in 1972, DBP carried on to bring environmental responsibility to the core of its development financing operations. Decades into our overarching thrust of promoting and supporting green investments, there are times when we still find ourselves moonwalking in the face of new events, paradigms, and challenges to environmental protection. And this is because the speed and scale of implementing and sustaining green initiatives entail more than mobilizing resources and financial investments. The more critical part is rallying support and commitment for green governance as a necessary enabling mechanism towards sustainable development. And climate change and transition finance that goes with it are so different. On the strength of our mandate as a government-owned DFI like Land Bank, DBP has remained steadfast in its efforts to improve the overall quality of the environment in ways that also assist industries and others stakeholders to be involved and also do their proportionate share. With its mandate primarily anchored on the country's development vision, DBP strives to work beyond generating financial returns and commits to help achieve balance among economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection. Harnessing growth opportunities must not come at the expense of a healthy environment. This sustainability principle underpins DBP's performance of its pivotal role in delivering responsive banking and financial services, operations, and business decisions. Consistently steering towards the green growth path, we continue to strengthen our environmental financing programs. These include climate change-related initiatives, which we especially deem critical considering that the Philippines is identified to be highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and natural hazards. The topic of DFI's role in climate change and transition finance is indeed very relevant, given the vulnerability of the Philippines to extreme weather events, as you now very well know. Allow me now to share some perspectives on the drivers of mainstreaming climate change considerations throughout the Philippine DFI's operations and in transition financing activities. First is the Paris Climate Agreement, as we all know, a legally binding international UN treaty under the UN FCC that aims to keep global warming to below 2 degrees and preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to pre-industrial levels. It sets an ambitious climate action. And to put it succinctly, the Paris Climate Agreement points up these commitments. By 2020, nationally determined contribution. By 2024, transparent report on action taken. As a result of the Paris Climate Agreement, the Philippines commits to a projected GHG emissions reduction and avoidance of 75%, of which 2.71% is unconditional and 72.29% is conditional. This represents the country's ambition for GHG mitigation for the period 2020 to 2030, encompassing the areas of agriculture, waste management, industry, transport, and energy. This commitment is referenced against a projected business as usual cumulative economy-wide emission of 3,340.3 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for the same period. In order to meet this commitment, cumulative GHG emissions for the period 2020 to 2030 should be limited to approximately 835 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. The clean energy scenario reported in the Philippine Energy Plan shows a cumulative emission of 2,113 metric tons, combining both energy and transport for the same period. On a long-term basis, the Philippines is expected to incur 177 billion pesos or $3.6 billion per year in losses to public and private assets due to typhoons and earthquakes. In the next 50 years, the country has a 40% chance of experiencing a loss exceeding 989 billion pesos and a 20% chance of experiencing a loss exceeding 1.525 billion pesos. The second perspective stems from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Circular Number 1085 on Sustainable Finance Framework, or the SFF. Issued on April 29, 2020, this circular mandates all BSP-supervised financial institutions like DBP to embed sustainability principles, including environmental and social risk areas, in their corporate governance framework, risk management systems, and strategic objectives. With this directive, BSP has acknowledged the threat posed by climate change and other E&S risks to the country's financial stability due to their impacts on the operations and financial interests of banks. In particular, physical and transition risks arising from climate change could result in significant societal, economic, and financial risks affecting the banks and their stakeholders. Thus, the BSP likewise recognizes the critical role of the financial industry in pursuing sustainable and resilient growth by enabling environmentally and socially responsible business decisions consistent with the aspirations under the Philippine Development Plan. In response, DBP developed the bank's sustainability strategy and transition plan, which lays out the bank's vision and approaches to comply with this BSP circular in the next 3 years, while meeting commitments under the United Nations Principles for Responsible Banking. DBP's sustainability strategy and transition plan provides the platform and structure for deeper institutionalization of sustainability policies and procedures in DBP. Aside from regulatory and legal impetus, the integration of environmental, social, and governance issues is adopted as a way to generate new businesses from sustainable investment opportunities and offers a financial risk management technique. DBP's credit policy and credit guidelines also incorporate provisions in environmental and social due diligence. These guidelines clearly define how consideration for the economic, social, and environmental impacts of proposed projects are embedded in the initial stages of loan processing, during screening, and loan evaluation. Along this line, DBP account officers are required to determine a proposed project's environmental risk category, vulnerability to natural hazards, social safeguards, and appropriate project performance monitoring indicators. This process ensures DBP only finances projects that would not negatively impact the environment. Another net takeaway is that it would bring about the intended sustainable socio-economic benefits. The Paris Climate Agreement and BSP Circular 1085 provide opportunities to financing more green projects. At the same time, however, it also presents transition risks on fossil fuel energy projects that likely would result to stranded assets. These transition risks are the following: change in policy and regulations, such as the green energy auction, renewable portion standard, among others, that favors development of renewable energy. Technology development, i.e. electric vehicle, solar battery, hybrid, energy efficient technologies and the like, and of course, consumer preference. These are also the physical risks. The Philippines is a testament to the impact of climate change as it frequently experiences extreme weather events such as typhoons, flooding, landslide, rising sea level, even tsunami or drought, among others. These are risks that need to be seriously considered in financing development projects to avoid stranded assets later on. One of the roles of DFIs is to extend transition financing through the provision of climate programs and products to help strategic sectors and industries to transition towards a more sustainable and resilient business model. DBP has specific programs and products that aim to contribute to the national government's effort to combat the impact of climate change. And these are the Energy Efficiency Savings, or what we call the E2Save financing program, the FUSed, which stands for Financing Utilities for Sustainable Energy Development Program, or the SMPP, the Solar Merchant Power Plant Program, the SWEEP, the Sustainable Waste Management for Enhanced Environmental Protection, the DBP Forest Program, which is about watershed preservation and protection, and of course the Green Climate Fund, to which we are just newly accredited. The E2Save program provides financing to help public and private institutions in improving their productivity by harnessing new technologies available in the market for their energy efficiency projects. E2Save allows loan repayment based on electricity savings to make investment affordable to end users. The program likewise aims to provide credit assistance to energy service companies to further promote the development of energy efficiency projects. FUSed. We also have a specific program to buttress investments in power generation and distribution projects. Our FUSed program aims to contribute in increasing access to electricity services, which we believe is part and parcel of efforts towards inclusive growth and poverty reduction. By the end of program implementation in 2030, we hope that FUSed would have funded at least 40 billion pesos of the estimated investment requirement for power generation and distribution under the Philippine Energy Plan for 2010 to 2030. DBP also places equal importance on renewable energy with a dedicated program, the Solar Merchant Power Plant Financing Program, or SMPP. Through the SMPP, DBP channels support to the attainment of the national government's target of 35% renewable energy in the country's energy mix by 2030 as laid out in the Philippine Energy Plan. Through this program, DBP hopes to be an instrumental ally, a catalyst with the Philippine government in its goal of increasing solar photovoltaic capacity in the country from 2.16 gigawatts in 2020 to 15.9 gigawatts by 2030. We are bent on touching all bases, as we also have the Sustainable Waste Management for Enhanced Environmental Protection Program, aptly abbreviated SWEEP. SWEEP supports the strict implementation of Philippine Republic Act number 9003, or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, and the Republic Act number 6969, or the Toxic Substances and Hazardous and Nuclear Waste Act of 1990. SWEEP is DBP's program response to the need for the development of solid and hazardous waste management facilities and waste-to-energy projects. Through this program, DBP provides credit assistance to public and private companies as we collaborate with them towards protecting the environment and addressing climate change. Deforestation and forest degradation are also major areas of concern in combating climate change. To help address these environmental challenges, we continue to implement the DBP Forest Program, an initiative for the protection of the country's critical watersheds and coastal areas. Launched in 2005, the DBP Forest Program supports the planting of high-value fruit and forest trees and mangroves in selected open forest areas. Through this initiative, DBP engages in a multi-sectoral collaboration on forest projects identified to help reduce soil and coastal erosion, conserve water, avoid floods, increase biodiversity, serve as a spawning ground for fish and crustaceans, serve as protection against even strong wave incursion, and promote rural livelihood opportunities. Corollary to these efforts to support and encourage countrywide greening and reforestation, the DBP Forest Program also seeks to increase knowledge in technical planting requirements and environmental protection, and to strengthen the organization of DBP forest partners in terms of information, capability, and experience. Taking our efforts further on the environmental sustainability front, and very much encouraged with our counterpart land banks achieving the first project for the Philippines under the GCF, we have now taken strides to fulfill our accreditation under this fund. And as I had mentioned in our board meeting, we are challenging the ADFIAP to be the facilitator for all the member banks to try and get accredited on this green fund, which focuses on helping vulnerable societies adapt to the inevitable impacts of climate change. This further cements DBP's position as a bank for the environment, as we play an active role in encouraging clients and participating financial institutions to include green considerations in their businesses and trusts. With this latest achievement, DBP becomes then the second Philippine accredited entities, and we also joined the ranks of only, I think, 113 accredited institutions globally to date. And we do hope that that number will increase with the help of ADFIAP among us member banks here today. As a next step to DBP's accreditation, and as we sign the Accreditation Master Agreement, which will hopefully will be the last phase of the application process, it is targeted, we hope, for the fourth quarter of the year, that we can finally access up to $250 million per GCF project program. Presently, DBP undertakes parallel compliance to the GCF conditions as the bank actively engages in exploratory discussions and meetings with potential partners, executing entities to develop and implement GCF projects. There are now a total of 6 GCF projects in the pipeline. The People's Survival Fund, Enhanced Direct Access Facility, a blended finance scheme between the PSF and a $20 million GCF grant to augment the PSF budget and streamline the process and accelerate disbursement. We have the viability gap financing by complementing DBP's environmental programs, also a blended finance scheme through DBP loans and GCF grant, hopefully, to complement DBP's fused water and sweep financing programs. Also, the solar-powered water systems in Mindanao that we have instituted in one municipality in partnership with the Mindanao Development Authority for irrigation of farmlands and delivery of potable water supply as a climate adaptation project under GCF. Fourth, Sustainable Cities and Communities Program, a combined GCF loan and grant to finance energy services companies model, i.e. in energy efficiency, in buildings, street lighting, and transport. Fifth, nature-based adaptation for biodiversity enhancement. In partnership with the UNDP Philippines and the DNR, this aims to target biodiversity-related investments for increased climate resiliency. Sixth, investment readiness capacity development for coastal communities, a partnership initiative with RARE Philippines to assist local fishing communities in the management of coastal fisheries to ensure a more sustainable food supply, improve social equity, and greater resilience to climate impacts. Let me just tell you a bit more about the People's Survival Fund Plus, or PSF Plus, that I mentioned earlier. Initial efforts have already been undertaken with a concept note already submitted for consideration of the GCF Secretariat. The PSF is a program of the national government with a 1 billion peso annual fund sourced from the General Appropriation Act, intended for local governments, local government units, and accredited local community organization. It is targeted at implementing climate change adaptation projects that will better equip vulnerable communities to deal with the impacts of climate change. We recognize, however, that the PSF may still be complemented to further address the growing needs of LGUs for adaptation projects to counter the effects of climate change. Hence, the envisioned PSF Plus. As a DFI, DBP remains steadfast in fulfilling its catalytic role in balancing economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection by providing financing to strategic sectors and industries through its climate and transition finance programs and products. DFIs must commit to sustainable finance by putting as target the net zero objective of the Paris Agreement, as well as the attainment of other SDGs, such as clean water and sanitation, good health and well-being, quality education, sustainable energy, among others. Mainstreaming climate change consideration in risk management systems, corporate governance frameworks, and in investing and lending activities should always be an unswerving priority undertaken of all DFIs. As the Philippines' mandated bank for financing inclusive and sustainable development, DBP will always be tireless in exploring responsive climate actions. With an increasing keenness for sustainability and concern for human security, we commit to build possibilities towards meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.